Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Megan. I'm joining my co-host, Jen, again. Hey, Jen. How's it going?
Good. I am excited about many things about this guest today. First and foremost, he's wearing a green tie and he is a Birds fan. So can't go wrong.
Yes. I mean, I will say we didn't get into his college sports preference. So if only he were a Penn State fan, then he would probably even get more more accolades from you.
Yeah, I mean, he is a Philly guy, though, so fingers crossed.
Yes. So today we're joined by Joe Stathius. And Joe, I talked to Joe a few weeks ago. He just a delightful person to chat with, but he's really run through a few different career pivots and paths, which seems to be a current theme on the show overall. But I love his background because, he graduated law school around the same time you and I did, has kind of a similar background in college that I did, and then ended up, in litigation by accident, kind of like how you and I did. And was practicing in Philadelphia and now is in-house at a casino and has had some bobs and weaves along the way that have all kind of been the puzzle pieces and framework to where he is now. So I just love his story, and I think it's just a really interesting one for anyone to listen to, especially someone who's new into the legal field, and to kind of see things that you can do that kind of can build up your career path and, get you to an end game or an area that you didn't even know was possible at the time. So, with that, let's bring him in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Megan Henry.
Good morning, Joe. Welcome to Claims Never Sleep. We're so happy to have you. How are you today?
Hi, good morning. Pretty good. And you guys?
Wonderful. Well, I'm so happy to have you on because you and I chatted a few weeks ago, and I don't know, I felt like we had known each other for a while. We had some similar connections between firms. And you practiced in Philadelphia, so obviously there's a lot of commonality there. But I'm just so thrilled to have you on because now, you were a practicing attorney for some time, and now you're in-house as assistant general counsel, and you've made it to the other side, the non-billing side of the career. But you also had a really interesting path into law, right?
I did. Yeah. And thank you for having me. Yeah, definitely circuitous. And I often get asked oh, wow, assistant general counsel at a casino, that must be pretty cool. How did you end up in that role? And the story, it's circuitous, and I guess it's a little bit interesting. And I think, but I don't know if it could have happened any other way, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So first, let's start here. How did you end up in law school?
Yeah, good question. So my undergrad degree is in chemistry, and it really was for no other reason other than I was pretty good at it. I really was not that great a writer. Math was just okay, and it's okay, I'll do chemistry, and then I'll figure it out. A few years down the line, I'll just declare and then go from there. And really, kind of just did worked through it. Still kind of stayed pretty good at it. And ended up meeting a professor. At the time, I'm thinking, I'll probably end up at med school. Most of my classmates are med school, fine, whatever. And I end up with a professor who I really loved, who was great to me, and he ended up being a pretty significant mentor. And he was a chemist in agricultural chemicals, like pesticides and stuff, and held his own patents, a number of patents. And said, I really think you ought to consider law school. I think your skill set is good for law school. And, here he is telling me about all the people that are billing him time, significant money right at the time, 2008, 2009, billing him real serious money for some of his patent work. And so I think, you could do that. So I said, yeah, I'm not really sure about med school. At the time, there was so much press around people who are going into med school and not making any money and paying a gazillion dollars in med mal insurance, and you don't make any real, And I just said, you know what, let me try law school and decide to take that path. And like I said, every intention in the world. Now I'm going to go to law school. I end up at GW, which at the time had one of the top patent programs in the country, and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and go through the process. And everything's going great until the economic downturn hits in 2010, 2011. I think you guys are smiling because you guys probably remember what that was like, or maybe you've heard those stories. And like, you can't even get a job. You can't even sniff a job. I always tell people there was an on-campus interview program at George Washington, and George Washington at the time is a top 20 school, right?
Yeah.
So there's an on-campus interview program where they put you in like hotel rooms all over the city. All the big firms have hotel rooms. So I sent out 187 applications as a part of the on-campus interview program. My grades are pretty good, by the way. Like, they're not great, but they're decent. I get 5 interviews. 5 out of 187 applications, 0 job offers. And if it wasn't for, to be honest with you, the leveraging of some relationships that like my family and friends had, I probably wouldn't have ended up at a job at all, and end up getting a job at a firm that specializes in insurance defense work, of all things. I don't even know if they would manage a patent case if you brought it to them, one way or the other. Maybe they would. Certainly I didn't touch any of it. And then all of a sudden, you're litigating cases in the insurance defense world instead of litigating whether some chemical is infringing on some other chemical, which was the plan. So you never know.
Yeah, and I can relate to, because you and I discussed this on the phone. Like, I had a similar idea when I went to law school. I was like, okay, I had my first idea was I was going to go into patent law as well, because I too was pre-med, and I had planned to go to medical school, and I pivoted away from that. And I could sit for the patent bar, but my undergrad degree wasn't in, chemical engineering, or it wasn't in anything super like science based. And I was like, well, I could sit for this bar, I could get this patent bar, but who's going to hire me? Because my classmates who have a mechanical engineering degree or a biology degree or a microbiology degree, they're much more appealing than me and my math and psychology degree. So I had to pivot, and here I am.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we talked about this on the call, but I'm sitting in class. Like I said, GW at the time has like one of the best patent law programs in the country. So it's drawing from people all over the world. And like, one of my best friends was like an engineer, a real engineer, not some student chemistry person, right? Yeah. Who practiced for like 15 years, like literally building bridges before he decided to become a patent attorney, right? And go to law school and become a patent attorney. So, here I am like, well, my professor a couple of years ago said, and he's, no, Joe, this is how the bridge actually got built. So it's super, it's super interesting, because you're completely overwhelmed, you're completely outclassed. And I guess maybe that is the reason I couldn't get a job. I don't know. But luckily we were able to find something to at least get something of a paycheck, I guess.
Well, and also because you being in DC, the number of firms who specialize in that area of law is probably one of the largest metropolitan areas that have that.
Definitely. But everybody deals, how many people, you guys talk to people all the time as a part of this podcast or in your daily lives. How many people say the similar stuff? My boss, the general counsel here at the casino, her undergrad degree is in math. Mm-hmm. Again, same kind of thing. Like, she has a math degree from the University of Pennsylvania. Oh, really? Yeah, right. And so no one really knows what they're going to do. And so you just kind of shoot for the best and hope.
Yeah, I graduated law school in 2008. So right when everything started completely crashing. And I was a Spanish major in undergrad, like, talk about a random major that, like, what are you going to do with? And I was applying for jobs at like the Justice Project and Friends of Farm Workers, like legal aid. And I couldn't get hired anywhere. And just as you did, a family connection said, I can get you a job at an insurance defense firm. All right, here we go. And now all these years later.
Yeah. It's funny. So many people deal with this stuff. Like, so when in 2000, I guess it was like 2014, 13 or 14, I was approached by my undergrad program to give the commencement speech for the chemistry department, department, right? And when the professor reached out to me to say, hey, would you be willing to do this? His whole thing was, our students are really struggling to find jobs. They're really struggling to find stuff. There's a lot of students in this class. I mean, the chemistry program at my undergrad was, maybe 50 people total, 40 people total. So there's not a ton, right? But if there's like 10 out of that 40 or 50 that either don't know what they want to do, can't get into a med school program, are really kind of lost. Like, they're just looking for some direction. And so when he asked me to do it, the reason he asked me to do it was because you've done this alternate path. At the time I was, an in-house litigation attorney for State Farm. And like, maybe you could come and give this talk, which was kind of cool. It was kind of nice to know that, like, again, there's this huge population of people that are just struggling to find their path.
Also, what an honor. Like,
Cool.
I would be so intimidated to do that.
It was super cool. And I was so nervous.
Yeah.
And it's all the parents and stuff, I'm like 27, probably 26 at the time, and all the parents, but it was cool. It was neat. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So then you get this job in insurance defense, and what is your practice looking at that point out of the gates? And I know the firm that you went to go work for, and they're very well known in Philadelphia, very highly respected, really good lawyers. So I'm sure you had great training and like exposure to like pretty high exposure matters.
Yeah, although it didn't start that way. So so I started as a clerk for the firm. I was there for 2 summers in a row, and that was great. And they're, when you're a clerk, you'll just take anything. Anything anybody comes in the door with, they will give it to you, and you will take it. And you're basically free labor to those partners. So that's wonderful. They'll take it. You can barely even bill the time, right? So that worked out really well. Got a ton of exposure, and really the way in that firm, the way it worked out was, if they had an opening for a spot and you passed the bar, it didn't really matter. I'm not sure how much it mattered to them, how much you excelled, or even how much you really want it to be in a particular department in the firm. The firm has a ton of departments, but like, they're not really looking for that. And so like, maybe within a week of me passing the bar, somebody resigned, and they said, oh, well, like, we literally have a physical office for you. You can literally take this spot. We were happy with your work. You can have it. And I said, okay, great. So it was workers' comp defense, right away.
Starting. Yeah.
And to the point where, so I get my email, you pass the bar, congratulations. I think we have like a party, whatever, on that Saturday or Sunday of the weekend. And I'll never forget, it was the 30th of October. So I still haven't gotten the email or the piece of paper with like my final registration, my number, my PA registration, attorney number, the whole thing. Like, I don't have any of that, right? I know I passed the bar. They tell me that's coming in the mail because I did the application, but that's it. That's all I have. So on the 30th of October, 2011, my boss walks in the office and says, there's a workers' comp hearing in Allentown, Pennsylvania tomorrow, and you're going. I literally have not practiced one day yet. Not one day, right? Because I still have my number.
Are you even sworn in?
I sent the paperwork, right?
Okay.
So I say to my boss, and he's going to be my boss now for some time, and I had been working with him as a clerk for a while before, right? And I say, I don't know that I can go. Like, I'm not really sure. Like, I don't have my number. I don't really have my paperwork. I don't have my card. I have nothing. Like, he's like, well, you passed the bar, right? I said, yeah. I said, but I'm still waiting for, oh, no. If you pass the bar, you're an attorney. You're going. So I said, well, I just don't know. I don't think it's a good idea. He said, look, Joe, you do whatever it is that you need to do for the rest of the day today to feel better about the fact that you're going. Because in the morning, you're going to be in Allentown defending this workers' comp case. This is it, right? Okay. So I literally spent the rest of the day calling the Bar Association and asking them to please look at my application, tell me I'm okay. They did. By the end of the day, they told me I was okay, and literally read my attorney number over the phone to me so that I knew that I was ready to rock when I went to Allentown the following morning and say, okay, I am officially a practicing attorney. I'm officially allowed to be here. And I don't even want to think about what would have happened had I not been able to get them on the phone that day. But it was October 31st. It was Halloween Day. I went and defended my first, workers' comp little hearing.
And you felt like you were dressed like a clown when you walked in.
I certainly wasn't dressed as an attorney. No, it was fine. Yeah, but I always think about that story a lot because it's like, you're 25 years old or whatever you are, and you just passed the bar and you're super, super excited to get started, and you have no conception of, like, you're literally about to be in front of a judge, and you haven't even gotten the physical piece of paper in the mail to tell you, like, you're going to go do this now. So that was my very first day as an attorney. Yeah.
I remember, like, my first time that I had to appear in court, discovery court in Philadelphia, no less, which is like where you would start, right? Like, I used to call it kindergarten court. Like, this is where you're gonna get your feet wet. But the first time I got there and you had to sign in and put your number down, I'm like, I don't know what my number is.
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea. And then I remember, like, being in a panic and somehow figuring it out. And then later, whatever partner I worked for at the time was like, yeah, you need to commit that number to memory. Like, but it didn't even occur to me that I needed it. Like, I was like, I had no idea. I didn't even know what to expect. People just gave me a stack of motions. And I was just like looking at what other people were doing. And that was the time that you had to, like, if they were uncontested, you had to stamp it with one thing. If they were contested, you put them in different bins. And like, there was a whole process to this.
Yeah. Well, it's true, because you don't, like, you know, if I said, what's your driver's license number? No one, I don't think anybody knows that by memory. If you do that, that's very impressive. But, like, no one knows that. I just pull it out and look at it. But no one carries their bar card with them either. So you have to memorize it. You have no choice.
Yeah.
But it is cool. You're right. Discovery court is such a cool way for a younger attorney. Now it's all different, but, like, at the time, it was such a cool way for people to get used to it. And what was even cooler for me is, like, you're making all these relations. So the way we did it at State Farm was, like, you had it for 6 months. You had 6 months of discovery court, and you were literally there every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you know, depending on the term and year. That was when you had discovery court. So, you know, you're in there and you're making these great relationships, in addition to hearing argument and stuff, which is cool, but you're making all these great relationships with also people who are your same age, who also have no clue what they're doing. Yes. And they're all from some of these firms that, you know, I mean, I was on the defense side, right? So they're plaintiffs' attorneys, but they've never tried a case before, probably. They've just been thrown into discovery court too. Here's your stack, go defend these, whatever. They're trying to figure it out. But what's ironic is now, you know, I'll be 40 in February, and those guys and women that I was getting to know very, very well, because they're there every day too, right? And I'm getting to know them very well. They all, like, own their own firms now, or they're partners at major firms, and and when they, you know, unfortunately sue the casino, I call them sometimes. I call them, like, you know, good to talk to you guys. Like, it's super, super cool to be able to have those relationships, to even be able to tell our outside counsel, who, you know, he has relationships with these guys too. But to be able to say, look, like, we kind of came up together, me and so came up together. Like, I am happy to get on the phone with them and either try and settle something, or, you know, work out a discovery issue, or whatever. Like, and sometimes that relationship is closer than our outside counsel. So I'm happy to do it, and it really works out well.
And I thought about that when you said you were getting sent to Allentown, right? So not only are you going for your first day of being an actual lawyer to court, it's to a court that you've never been to, you don't know anyone. Whereas, like, I came up kind of in Lackawanna County, I live in Scranton, and you walk in there and, like, the judge is my parents' friend who I've known since I was 5, and, like, opposing counsel is, you know, my friend from high school's dad. So, like, it makes a huge difference because you don't have as much, people are kind of holding your hand because everybody knows everybody. And you know, so, like, I remember being in front of this one judge for the first time, and he looks at my last name. He's like, Cap, I don't know that last name. What's your maiden name? And I told him, I was like, I know your grandfather, and I know your dad. And yeah, it's just, like, that's what small town lawyering is like. So I just can't imagine kind of being thrown into the complete unknown.
You know, so one of the things that was interesting about discovery court, like, I remember going and being so nervous, like, studying, you know, these motions to the point of, like, you know, my stomach hurt, and sitting there and then listening to these experienced attorneys argue. And then I was like, I'm not worried anymore, because I'm like, they don't know what the hell they're talking about either.
Yeah.
So then I was like, I'm good. This will be fine. And even if they knew what they were talking about, it didn't matter, because most of the time they still got their asses handed to them anyway, depending on whatever mood, whatever judge was in that day. So I was like, all right, this is fine. Like, I don't know what I'm so worried about. And half people aren't listening anyway. And if you do listen, you learn something, and you can gauge what mood, you know, the judge is in that day. So it took the stress off, and I was like, this is a good place to practice.
Yes. I'll give you another one from discovery court that, like, for if you have younger listeners, that's super valuable. And I'm sure you guys know exactly who I'm talking about. There is a court administrator in Philadelphia that runs the discovery court. who is the man, who is
Mhm.
one of my very favorite people, probably in the world, let alone in the legal world. And getting, like, again, you're 25 years old, you're just trying to figure it out, and he was amazing to me. I'm still very, very close with him, but made it so much more comfortable. It made it so much easier to be able to have those conversations about, what do I do, where do I go, and what do you think about this motion or whatever. Just these
Yes.
little tiny conversations. And rather than taking the tact of, like, I'm a lawyer, someone else is a court administrator, or someone else is a staff person, or the tip staff in Philadelphia, the people that, like, are the court's, administrators. God, those relationships are so valuable. So what a difference. And like I said, I just ran into him 2 weeks ago. Loved it.
Yeah, he's good people.
Yeah.
Although sometimes I'm like, I don't know if he remembers me or not. He pretends like he does, so I'm just gonna believe it that I left that good of an impression, even though I haven't seen him. Like, I don't see him as often anymore.
Right.
But if he doesn't know who I am, he does a good job pretending. So caps off to that.
Very cool. Yeah.
So what happened though? So you're at a private firm for a while, and then you mentioned you went over to State Farm. So how did that move come about for you?
In that one, like, I kind of knew I always wanted to go in-house,
Mhm.
right? And the job kind of pops up for State Farm. I apply. And at the time, I think, again, dumb, I think it's an in-house job. It says litigation, it says State Farm, it must be in-house, right? So I'm going to go and do it. Little do you know that, like, all of the major insurance companies have firms all over the country in all of the major cities who do litigation work on behalf of their insureds, and you're basically doing the exact same work that you did while you were in outside counsel, you did when you were in practice at a firm. So it worked out because I think the managing attorney and I kind of gelled a little bit, which was really great. He ends up hiring me. And even more than that, maybe because of the nature of the work, maybe because the nature of the managing attorney, who really kind of fostered just an awesome atmosphere. To your point, Megan, from earlier, like, some of these people were my best friends. I mean, you were with them every single day. We're all very young. We're all pretty much the same age, and we're out in Center City, Philadelphia, I don't know, 3 times a night, or 3 times a week, 3 nights a week. And you're just kind of, you're going to each other's trials. People are in my office every day. I'm in their office every day. Let me tell you about what just happened at this deposition. Let me have this conversation with you about, I mean, what a cool experience. Some of them were older than me. Some of them were younger than me. And the ones that were older ended up becoming, like, amazing mentors, even though they were only just a few years older than me, because of course I have no experience. So, I'm going to, incrementally get better. And the ones that were younger than me, they're in my office relatively frequently, and them and I are still super close. It's just, in fact, one of them just left that office after 10 years. After 10 years, she had been in it. She was one of the younger ones and had been with the office 10 years. And so every time one person from this group leaves that office, we all get back together and do dinner and drinks and stuff. And so we were out on the town maybe a month ago celebrating her leaving. They did it for me when I left, another one who went over to another big firm in Philadelphia. So and 3 are still left. 3 are still left from a group of 6 that grew up together at each other's weddings, like, you name it.
Yes.
It was so cool.
It's funny because, like, today too, I'm getting all these texts because there's like this party in Philly for one of the 2 of the partners at one of my old firms both are retiring, and everyone's like texting, "Are you going? Are you going? Are you going?" And it's funny because, like, some of these people I never actually worked with, but we're all part of the same, like, family, and we used to still hang out even though our time didn't overlap. And so when we explained, like, "Oh yeah, we worked together," but I'm like, "Well, we didn't actually work together. We just, like," and unfortunately I can't go tonight, but it's all morning I've been getting the texts about everyone, getting together for another event at Tiernanog, because that's where those partners who are retiring love to go.
Great spot.
I know. I'm like, this place has been in business very long. It's on like a 20-year run, I think. 20, maybe 25.
Although I would not recommend it for the night that the Eagles win the Super Bowl, if they
Oh.
do win again, because I was there the night the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and I tried my very best to like walk a couple feet, and just that wasn't happening. It was crowded, but it is a great bar. Yeah.
Yeah, and for that, it's at a location that it was a prime location for a post Eagles win celebration.
Yeah, it was.
Good
It was
access
fun.
to polls and things.
Exactly.
So then, but then you had an interesting move though when you left State Farm. Like you went to Deloitte. So how did that? Because that's totally different from what you were doing as basically a house counsel for State Farm. So explain that.
That's the big jump. That's the one that, that everybody kind of gives you, maybe other than chemistry, right? But that's probably the big jump. And that's really wild. So I tell this story all the time. So I'm a chemistry major, right? I have kind of a maths, kind of science background. And at the time, for people that work in-house, the in-house litigation firms, like I'm talking about, claims litigation counsel offices will know what I'm talking about. You guys may not, I'm not sure, but they have to come up with metrics in a way to measure how the Philadelphia office is doing against the Denver office of State Farm, right? So, I mean, and how can you, right? The law is completely different. The track is completely different. The speed of the way cases are done is completely, how can you possibly know? So one of the ways that they do it is client survey scores. Mm-hmm. After a case is over, the client gets a survey. How did we do? Obviously, whatever. So at the top, it's a 1 out of 10, 0 out of 10 range. And obviously you're shooting for a 10. And so everybody's trying to get a 10 from their clients. Okay, great. So at the end of the year, performance numbers are coming out by office, and performance numbers by office make a difference in terms of raises and bonuses. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that it's important to us, right? And so they report it, here's the big chart and here's how all the offices did, whatever. And Philadelphia gets like a 9.9, or maybe it got a 9.8, maybe is a better example. Philadelphia gets a 9.8. Oh, wow, that's really awesome, right? I mean, out of 10, that's great. Denver gets a 9.9. Oh, and now Denver gets a better raise, right, than Philadelphia. How can that be? So I start asking questions. Can you tell me whether those two scores are statistically significantly different? What exactly is the standard deviation between those scores? Because I'm not sure that that's going to qualify as a difference. We should all be in the same band here, right? And my boss, who was not a math person, would just roll his eyes and say, yeah, Joe, take it up with somebody else. This is not our problem.
Leave me alone, Joe.
Right, exactly. That, honest to God, like that was pretty much my relationship with him, was just like, all right, Joe, thanks. So, you get into these conversations, you're super focused on sort of the analytics of a lot of this stuff. And then State Farm makes this announcement. We're going to uniformalize operations across all 38 offices, all 1,600 employees, all about 700 lawyers. We're going to uniformalize operations across the whole country. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to, uniformalize software. We're going to use similar metrics. We're going to be super conscious of stuff like standard deviation. And my boss says, Joe, I want you to be on this committee. So of course, happy to do it, whatever. Kind of rise the ranks and end up becoming the director of this committee. So now I'm the director of this program that is not practicing law. We are not interested, really. I mean, we're interested in, facilitating people practicing good law, but we're not practicing law. We're just helping offices do their jobs better and more efficiently. Mm-hmm. And I'm in that role for some time, and Deloitte comes calling and says, we're starting a new practice. It's the legal management consulting practice. Mm-hmm. So Deloitte doesn't practice law. Deloitte's not allowed to practice law, right? Some of the states are starting to change that rule a little bit, but really? Deloitte at the time, yeah. So at the time, Deloitte doesn't practice law at all. Mm-hmm. And so they're starting this practice. They're recruiting some lawyers from some of the bigger companies. Like my boss, the managing director I answered to for the most part, was one of the top in-house people at Liberty Mutual. Mm-hmm. So he's starting this sort of insurance practice within legal management consulting, and we want to leverage our consulting opportunities that we already have with the federal government, with some of these major companies, and we want to help their law departments do their jobs better. Mm-hmm. And that becomes my job. For 2.5 years, I'm on the phone with the general counsels at top, Forbes 50, Forbes 20 companies. in trying to help their operations, building PowerPoints. Of course, I'm lost in all that stuff. The consulting stuff, I'm useless. And half of the team is consultants, right? Real consultants, people who've been doing this for a long time. They're not lawyers. They're just
Not a pretend consultant like you.
right. Well, right. They're pretend lawyers. I'm a pretend consultant, which is fine. And we did okay with it, but the learning curve on the consulting side was unbelievable. I'm sure their learning curve on the law side was not easy either. But you're making these like huge millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of recommendations to companies about, hey, what software are you using for your contracts? What software are you using for your document management? Where are your pain points? Are your attorneys who make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, are they in the office making their own copies? And how long are they sitting at the copy machine while they're making their own copies?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that the work is below them. It literally means it's a bad use of your money, the company, their time, right? So how can you build efficiencies into your current processes to take some of that off of their plates, use their time at the highest level? And so the analytics behind that when you're talking to like huge companies is huge. I'll give you a great example. So like some of these big insurance companies get tens of thousands of subpoenas, right? You can imagine when you issue a subpoena as a part of a car accident case, whatever.
Yeah.
That work can all be offshored. Right now, all that work is being done in-house at the claims level for a lot of money. And that process is very, very expensive. So even just responding to subpoenas alone, if a technology is in place and if the right work is being done by the right people, you can save probably millions of dollars at some of the high levels. So it was examples like that that really kind of was the driving force behind Deloitte.
That's interesting though too. So like how did you like pivoting into that role compared to where you were?
One thing, it was 100% remote. And I really didn't like it. Some people like it. I can appreciate why. My wife just took a new job. She's 100% remote and loves it. Good for her. But it just was not for me. In fact, the group, this legal management consulting group, was made up of people all over the country. And like the aggregation was in like Chicago, for instance. There was a decent number of people in Los Angeles, but even that group only had like 10 or 15 people, right? So, but the rest of the country had like one, Tampa had two, whatever. New York had a few. Philadelphia had one, me. That's it. So when they start talking about like, oh, we want you to come into the office more, especially as COVID sort of like ramped down and people started talking about return to work, return to the office. Well, we want you to come back to the office. Well, I'd love to come into the office. I want to be in the office. And I loved my time when I would jump on a plane and fly to Chicago and be with that group. That was great. But why? But now I'm going to go to Philadelphia and there's nobody in there. There's tons of Deloitte people, but there's nobody in there from my practice. And I'm certainly not going to collaborate with the tax people. Hey, tax guy, could you help me with these subpoena responses? This could be a real issue. Maybe we can make something.
Can you be my friend?
Yeah. Like that was never going to happen. And so that was a big part, that this idea of the siloification really of an individual, right? An individual who kind of just sits by his or herself. You're dealing with time zone changes and stuff, which is fine. We're on the phone with India a lot. We're on the phone with the West Coast a lot. And you're just working through that part. That part was easy. But this lack of, physical interaction within, even in this office where I am now is awesome. And so not having that, I really missed that, and really missed the opportunity that I used to have at State Farm, right? Like these guys and women that I had come up with and grown up with, we were like putting on a Friday afternoon. We would like pull out a cup and like putt into this cup and have contests and stuff. And, we would do all kinds of crazy stuff. It was amazing. What an atmosphere. And then you're just like, okay, I'm going to sit in front of my desk for the next 8 hours. It just wasn't the same.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about that stuff, it's like that brings back those like warm memories of the, like it's goofing off, but it's bonding and it has a lot of value to it as well. I wouldn't say I was putting in the corner, but I was chatting. There was a lot of chatting.
Yeah. I feel like I think my wife feels like I'm going through like a midlife crisis almost every day, right? Just like like it's only a matter of time before I show up in like a red Corvette, because I'm basically Frank the Tank every single day, and it really does feel like that. You just, it was so warm and such great memories. And, it's, as you get older, as people have kids, as people move out of the city, like this happens on its own. Right.
Yeah. That is a big part of it too.
Yeah.
But it's funny because two of my closest friends from the very first firm I worked at, like I talk to them like on a weekly basis, and we've all gone, out to do different things, although they stayed at that firm for a much longer time than I did. But we try to go out to lunch like once a quarter or dinner once a quarter, and we it's long lasting
Yes.
friendships. So then what brought you to the casino?
So I missed two things. I missed being in the office, and I've really missed practicing law. Because again, now you're like, don't get me wrong, like Deloitte is paying for our license. Like my license was kept up. It's not like I went in inactive status or anything. And I could have done something, I guess. But I just, it's just not the same. It's just not the same. You want to be a part of it, and you're having conversations with these attorneys who are like extremely accomplished in some of these huge pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and banks. And they have like huge things to worry about, huge stuff that they're on their minds like every day. And you call them and you're like, how long have you been at that copier? That could be. And they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They want to talk to other attorneys about other law stuff that is important to them, stuff that, some of them have been practicing for 30, 40 years in the same space, right? These men and women are genuinely experts, like world-class experts in their field. And they have no interest, in talking to you about some of the operation stuff. And some of them do, some of them have a little bit of that desire, but most of them don't. And I often found myself having like legal conversations with them. And meanwhile, the consultants and my boss is on saying, you really shouldn't do this. It's not really what we're interested in here. There's nothing we can do for them. So I really, really missed it. This job ends up just getting posted on LinkedIn. And our current chief compliance officer used to work at the very first firm, the firm
There
with
you
the
go.
guy who comes in, you're going to Allentown in the morning.
Yeah.
She was in another department at the time, another department of that firm, but she was there, and her and I, had a relationship, and I just reached out on LinkedIn and said, hey, this has been, I know it's been a while, but I saw this posted and I think it might be interesting. And it's an amazing kind of thing because, how many in-house attorneys are former insurance defense attorneys? There aren't that many, right? It's just not that much of an opportunity. Well, you can imagine casinos have a number of claims. Casinos have a number of trip and falls and slip and falls and all kinds of, alcohol is served downstairs. Like you run into all kinds of stuff. We have over 2,500 employees here.
Yeah.
So you have tons of employment stuff. Like it just happens on its own, right? And the board of directors of this group, the leadership here at the casino really values on the ground litigation experience. Have you tried a case to a jury? Have you tried a case to a Philadelphia jury? How, and can we really have that conversation? Like, can we really talk about like, what's this going to look like in a closing argument? What's this going to look like in a deposition setting?
Yeah.
And so I think there are some companies who would say, no, I'm much more interested in what deal you just negotiated 3 weeks ago, and whether you got the appropriate indemnification language in your contract. And I'm not suggesting that's not a good thing. That's extremely important. But for whatever reason, this group really values some of that experience, maybe more so than others might. And so my predecessor, the person who was here before me in this chair, was a partner at another insurance defense firm. And when he retired, semi-retired, he took this job for that same reason. Again, they were looking for someone with that kind of experience. And then when he retired from this job, they were looking for someone again to fill that exact skill set, and hired me.
Well, and I mean, it absolutely makes sense, but I'm sure like your time at Deloitte was very valuable too, because you already had like this more corporate experience as well to blend with your litigation experience. I'm sure that was a huge positive to bringing you on, in addition to your wonderful personality.
No, so it's funny you say that. So two things. So my boss, no doubt, my boss is consistently intrigued by the current GC is consistently intrigued by the Deloitte thing, right? Like she's very, very curious about the Deloitte work, and I get it. And the Deloitte name is a big name. My CEO is a New York guy, Wall Street guy. So like he knows the Deloitte thing. I think in and of itself that brings value. That name recognition brings value, right? There's definitely some of that, and there's definitely the ability to kind of have some of those conversations around operations that maybe is a little bit outside the scope, and it gives you more, as an in-house attorney, part of your job is to be pragmatic and a problem solver with your operations people, right? You're not just here necessarily to answer the law questions. You're here to help them get through their issues, navigating the law and through the way. And so, when we have slot people, or we have table games people, or we have food and beverage people here, they have no interest really in like, what is the nuance of this law or that law? They just want to know, like, can they serve this food tomorrow? What can they do with their employees? That's really what they're interested in. And so from an operations perspective, when you're in this legal management consulting practice, it's kind of the same thing, right? You're helping them to do their jobs and overlay law on top. So yeah, I think that was super valuable. The other thing that my wife and I talk about it all the time is you get really good at soft skills. And I'm not saying that you won't get good at soft skills litigating cases and trying cases. I think it's just a different soft skill, right? You're super close to your office, right? And that those 15 people, 50 people, whatever the number is, you get really, really close with those. And of course you have your friends and family outside of work, which is fine. But other than that, most of your relationships are adversarial. You might have some good relationships, but they are adversarial. The people on the other side of that phone are trying to get the most money for their client, and I'm trying to reduce that amount of money. That's my job on the defense side. This job is much more interactive than that. And so was Deloitte. Again, like, you're trying to help people to problem solve and still do so in a legal way, still do so within the regulatory scheme that we kind of live within. And so how can you do that is to really, Megan, to your point, I think it's on your LinkedIn page, like, you're a professional listener, I think is the way that you use your tagline is. God, man, you might not be that great a listener as a litigator. Like, that's actually a great skill for someone who takes a deposition. That's a huge skill, but that's not necessarily something that you pick up with naturally. But when someone is across the desk from me here and comes in and says, I'm having a problem with this employee. Well, like, the first reaction might be, some disciplinary step that might be necessary or might not, right? But really what they're trying to do is to solve the problem with the employee, not fire the employee right away. That's not the goal. The goal is, how can I work through that? And my goal is to help talk them through that and do so in a legal and regulatory way, right? So that part is super valuable. And that's something absolutely that came from Deloitte that I'm not sure would have been so, I don't know if the word's developed. I'm not sure it would have been so developed if I had stayed at State Farm.
Yeah, and we talk about soft skills a lot. Well, we meaning Jen and I, and in our firm as well, though, too, because I think those soft skills is something that in the like litigation world are very valuable, but not a lot of people possess, but really help move cases forward when you approach them with a soft skill approach, like trying to connect with your adversary or trying to connect with your insured. Like, I think, and Jen and I have talked about it too, that I think that's what helps get cases done faster than trying to beat the other side up. You're going to get a lot further if you just be friendly and listen.
Yep. But that does not come, I don't need to tell you, like, that doesn't come naturally to everybody. That is not, I used to text plaintiffs' attorneys, like, hey, can we settle X case? And he would, all you get back is like 25 ? And I would say, 10 ? Okay, 15, green check, thumbs up. The release is on the way. This is amazing. We just settled this case. But it happens, like it, and that's not something that people, necessarily are looking for. The other thing I'll tell you that I think that is a huge value is the business side of things. That came from Deloitte, but also, I mean, it's super valuable in you guys' practice too. I'm sure even in outside firms, you get very, very into the numbers and the costs of things, and that conversation about costs ends up being very valuable and giving you a ton of credibility with your business people. I'm sure it gives you guys a ton of credibility in outside practice, even whether you're talking to claims people, claims leadership, your own leadership in your own firms. That was something that was kind of pressed. And early on at State Farm, I said, I want to go get an MBA. And again, my boss is like, Joe, you don't need any of that. Get out of here with that. I'm like, yeah, but I wanted to, you just go settle another case. It's fine, But, pursued it, went and got it. And again, like, that's another piece of this like weird path that my boss loved. The CEO here loves, you have a law degree and an MBA. That's really cool. And gave you a ton of credibility at Deloitte, and a ton of credibility when you're having these conversations with some of this leadership of the law department, who probably also has an MBA because that's how they rose the ladder in their larger companies. Because they, again, are trying to be pragmatic. They're trying to be conscious of some of the financial constraints of their own company while making sure that we're doing everything, under this legal umbrella that we have no choice but to do.
It's interesting because I think you're maybe didn't know it at the time, but very strategic in your moves and like making lateral moves and not always moving up the chain. But it's just interesting then to kind of take a look back and be like, wow, without having made those steps, you may not have made it to where you are at this point. Yeah. And I think that's a really important message to tell people, especially like people early on in their career who maybe are kind of like looking up and not always looking in other directions.
Yes.
1,000%. And the opportunities, like, I need you to take the next deposition tomorrow. If you've taken 100 depositions, you're going to be very comfortable saying yes to that. But if somebody comes in and says, I need you to sit on a committee for, I don't know, anything, diversity and inclusion, like you name it, doesn't matter. If you're not comfortable with that, it's very possible that you're going to say no. And I'm not saying to say yes to everything. That's not what I'm suggesting, because you have to be conscious of your time. But if you think you can squeeze it in your time, that's one of the things that I think is a huge takeaway, is just like, you should take it. You should take it, and you should jump at it, and you should see. And if you don't like it, step away. Give it a year, give it 6 months, and step away. You were just a volunteer anyway. But if you do like it and you develop some amazing relationships with other people, I have a friend who's at another insurance company who, has been very involved in the diversity and inclusion initiatives in some of these other companies in the past few years. And God, the relationships that she has made she came in as a relatively lower level, attorney in this big insurance company. And now, she's getting phone calls from the GC of huge insurance companies. I mean, that's an amazing, pipeline that she would not have if she's just sitting in her office doing her job, she would have never had that opportunity. It just doesn't work that way. But because you get involved in these extra things, all of a sudden you have this exposure. Somebody says, oh, would you give a speech here, whatever. And how nice is that? I mean, somebody asks you to be on a podcast. How cool. Amazing.
So, but now in your role though, and you and I had talked about this on the phone, like, you have so many different things come at you in a day. But your role is not to be really an expert on any of all the things, but just knowing how to almost direct the traffic. Like, all right, this is your problem. All right, I'm going to direct you over here, and this person can help you with your problem. And I love that role for you. And I think your building blocks really got you there because you have so many knowledge and so many different areas that you're like, okay, I understand. Like, you can listen, you can understand what the problem is. You might not have the answer, but you can direct them to someone who does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the law in general, like, people say like, oh, the bar is so dumb because the bar exam like doesn't really prepare you for practicing law, right? It's not like that, right? But the process of studying for the bar is different. And I'll tell you why. What's super interesting about that, like, I'm sure there was a ton of stuff on family law in studying for the bar, and I'm sure I studied for it for days, and I really don't remember any of it, right? I couldn't tell you the law for any of it, right? Nobody probably could, except unless they practice family law. But somebody says something to you and you find yourself saying, and this happens a lot in this office with the other attorneys, and you find yourself saying, that doesn't really sound right. Like that doesn't,
Right.
I can't tell you how often I say that can't be the law. Nope. That can't be the law. And it's not because I know for sure that it is the law or it's not. It's just that you have this like kind of weird conception in your brain that is at this point, it's like second nature, right? You kind of know what the law ought to be. And so you can kind of, to your point, man, you can kind of direct people to where they need to go, or you can jump on Lexis and do some quick research, or you can call, one of your firms who does work for you and find someone who genuinely is the expert in that. But, it's interesting that like attorneys, I think in particular, seem to be pretty good at this idea of like having a sense. It's almost like right and wrong. An individual, a kid, when they're real young, knows what right and wrong is, right? And I think attorneys, as they get more and more practiced and touch more and more stuff, or maybe just touch that stuff during preparation for the bar exam, have a sense of legal and illegal, right and wrong, something that you wouldn't maybe otherwise have. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think touching all of that stuff at Deloitte, State Farm, litigation, it doesn't give you that. It may not give you the breadth that you end up having, but it does give you an opportunity to be able to kind of direct people, play quarterback a little bit, make connections here to say, I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day about something kind of similar. Have you talked to so-and-so? And the bigger your organization gets, the more difficult those connections become. So it's even more important to kind of have them so that you can direct people in the appropriate way. Yeah. But you're right. Yeah, it is interesting, and I'm not sure that it could have happened any other way except the way it happened. Despite, Jen, to your point, that it is as circuitous and zigzag and jagged as it gets.
I like to compare somebody in a position like yours. You're like the triage. You're the emergency room, and you have to diagnose the problem. But if you can't fix it, you have to send them to a specialist, right? So like you're kind of like you're the jack of all trades. And I agree with you. Like I call it like my legal spidey sense, right? Like there's like a tingling, like this doesn't feel right. I don't know for sure, but there's just something that just feels a little bit off with it.
And it's 1,000% true, because what's the one question that everybody gets asked in triage? I mean, of course, if you go into the emergency room, right, and you have if your leg bone is sticking out of your leg, like that's an easy one, right? I don't need a doctor to tell me I broke my leg, right? But what's one of the first things they ever ask you? Are you having chest pain? Because it's like, okay, right away, that's a problem. Like, and the people who are asking you those questions as a part of the triage problem know right away, like, okay, you need emergency service right now. We're going to send you to the back. There's a doctor waiting for you in the back. Or, I mean, Joe, like your leg's a little sore. You worked out this morning. Why don't you go have a seat for a little while? We'll call you when we're ready. Right? I mean, and that person has that same kind of spidey sense.
To pivot a little bit though, because I don't want to let you go without asking about this, is because in claims, right? Video is gold. And I can't imagine a place where there's more video than a casino.
Oh gosh, yeah.
For every type of claim you can imagine, whether it be employment, a personal injury claim, like you have video everywhere. So I imagine you could and I know you're not totally in the claims, but I'm sure you're aware of them. And like, I imagine so many of the claims that come across just get debunked right away as soon as you review the video. Because I mean, there's probably not a crevice of that building that is not on video, besides maybe a bathroom stall.
Right. So the bathrooms aren't. I mean, the whole bathrooms are not. Right.
I hope yes.
No, of course not. Right. No, you're right. Here's what I'll say about that, though. So you're right. We have a gazillion cameras here. They're everywhere, and they are unbelievably high def. Yeah. Which that was probably the biggest surprise. Like, you're going into a casino, you're going to work at a casino, whatever, there's going to be cameras everywhere. But when you start to look at some of the surveillance footage and you can really capture what the person looks like, I mean, this is not some 7-Eleven. It is as high def as it gets. And that is extremely impressive. Part of the issue with that is it takes up a ton of space. It takes up a ton of memory. When you have that many cameras going at that kind of definition, it's significant. And so I don't know how many, I think it's impossible to know how many claims don't happen because something happens, and had that happened at a Target, whatever, some store, maybe they would have brought it, right? But they don't bring it because they're afraid that, oh, it was on camera, and so the whole case, I'm not even going to bring it. That could happen. But really what happens with us is we have like almost 3 million people come through the doors every year.
Wow.
Just a staggering number of people, right? And so with that number of people, stuff's going to happen. People are going to fall, people are going to slip, like that just happens on its own. Our job is to reduce that possibility as much as we can, but the idea that we're going to make that possibility zero, that's not going to happen, right? But what does end up happening is a lot of that stuff gets captured by surveillance or by security, and you really don't know whether that is going to turn into a claim or not. And then the question becomes, is there a preservation issue? Because you can't save everything. It can't be done. I mean, the data would be staggering.
Oh, yeah.
So you do your best to make a determination, but if you have a first notice lawsuit the day before the statute, and for your listeners, the statute's 2 years in Pennsylvania, right? So if the statute's going to run on November 14th, and you get the first notice of the fall on November 13th, you might have had an incident report of the fall happened, and maybe that person just tripped over their own 2 feet and fell, and you made a determination. I'm just not going to do that. We're not going to preserve.
You're not going to have
we're
video of that. No.
Right. And that is what's really interesting about this, is it makes for decision making that is very, very important, right? Because the preservation is super important for a potential claim when you know that there's a potential claim. But if I tell you we have a number of falls every single day, you have no conception of how many are going to turn into claims or not. I am often shocked at how few claims and ongoing litigation we have right now when you think about the number of people and the number of employees here.
Yeah.
It is wild.
Well, and I imagine you probably sometimes are encountered by counsel who are like, what do you mean there's not video? You have 1 million cameras there, and you mean this wasn't captured on video? And I can actually hear it in my head. I can hear, and I have a face to go with it. And but I'm sure some people are unsatisfied with the response, but I get it. Like, I mean, the server backup on that is massive.
I mean, of course you want it. Everyone wants video of everything. I mean, and in these days, like, if it's not on video, it didn't happen at all, right? That's like some people's take on stuff. So, you're right. And I think it's our job, myself, to the external world, or to our, lawyers who manage our claims, our litigation, to be able to make that argument and explain that situation to our judges, to our juries, if there's an issue about that. Because you're absolutely right. Every single juror, every single judge, every single plaintiff's attorney, every single plaintiff, there's 1 million cameras, casinos make gazillions of dollars. What do you mean there's no footage? How can that be? Or whatever the case may be. And it's just not realistic. So we have an amazing surveillance team. Our director of surveillance is absolutely fabulous. And he's been doing it for so long, he's so able to kind of go step by step, like, this is our process, this is what we do, these are our retention periods. And if we don't get notice within those retention periods, it may very well be gone.
Yeah. And but also the foresight on having a policy on that, because you don't see that all the time. And it's definitely a product of the size and the sophistication. But having that policy like outlined is very, very helpful, especially if it's a reasonable policy. It's like, oh, we race it the next day. Not so reasonable, but
every minute it goes away next. No, I mean, we try very hard, and we have our own regulatory requirements too, right? Like the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board has its own regulatory requirements around surveillance. They keep the surveillance team very, very busy, rightfully so, right? We're looking for all kinds of stuff. We're not just looking for trips and falls. We're looking for, people at the games and making sure the games are played the correct way. There's tons of those regulations
that's
around.
A huge part of it.
Right. So the retention is also is built right into those regulations, and of course we have to stay within those regulations. The next question though is like, can we do more than that? And how much more can we do before it just becomes too burdensome, which is really what the whole standard is, right? In Pennsylvania, at least, that's basically the standard. How reasonable is it to ask what you're asking?
And I'm curious about this, and I don't know if you're involved with this, but like there is a big portion with Parx Casino of like the online sports betting, right? And do you reach that arm too, or is that like separate?
No, that's here. Yep.
That's really interesting too, because those, I mean, that's gone through a big change over the last, like 5 years or so with the online sports betting.
It has. I mean, there are two very, very large players in that industry, right? And they are just massive. They have such a huge, footprint. And our goal is to make waves and do the best that we can within the footprint that we can live in. We have a lot of online offerings. We have offerings online for sports betting and for online gaming in PA, so you can play blackjack and slot machines and stuff via your phone online. And so, that's a pretty decent chunk of our business. The majority of our business is done here at the casino physically, because I think people like to come for shows and, play live blackjack and play live slot machines. But there is a decent chunk of our business that's online. But you're right. The sports betting thing is very interesting. There's a ton of upheaval in that space right this second. There's conversations around tax increases in Pennsylvania, and if that happens, then how do odds change? There's always conversations around like even here, do we root for the Eagles to win or lose? Somebody says, well, should they win? Do you really? I mean, I'm wearing a green tie. There's no chance I would ever root for them to lose, ever, right?
Right.
But for the people that don't really care all that much, and obviously we're in Philadelphia, so probably there's a lot of action on the Eagles, and there's a lot of action, to bet on the Eagles winning a game. The people that don't really care about the Eagles say, well, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if the Eagles lost, because the sportsbook might do a little bit better today. I mean, but that's not a conversation you have every day in your world, but that's the reality. That's what happens.
I was going to ask about your green tie.
Oh yeah, go Birds.
Well, Joe, we are pretty much out of time, and I could probably sit here and chat with you forever. As I said to you on the phone too, you're a great conversationalist. I love chatting with you.
You guys, you guys, it is very, very cool. This is a very cool experience. Thank you.
But before I let you go, I want to ask you this. I ask this of everyone who comes on the show. But knowing what you know now and going through all your career steps and changes, what advice would you give your younger self?
Ooh, I thought for sure you were going to say another person, like an external person. What advice would I give my younger self? Jeez. I'll tell you what. Don't be so ambitious. Don't be so ambitious. Jen, you talked about it earlier about this idea that you're always looking up, right? And maybe that doesn't happen as you get older. You kind of stop looking up and you start, looking more laterally. But when I was younger, it was a lot of up. It was a ton of up. And I think probably to my detriment. I think taking on some opportunities, maybe because they're forced on you, maybe because you can't tell your boss no, in my case, turned out not to be the worst thing in the world. Turned out to be pretty great. But, instead of just being so focused on, what am I going to be doing next year? What am I going to be doing 5 years from now? Just go putt in the corner for a couple hours with your friends. Just have a good time and stop worrying so much about moving to Bloomington, Illinois, so that you can be an in-house attorney at State Farm, which for a little while was a possibility for me. Don't do that. You're here. You're in your hometown. The Phillies are tonight. Don't worry about that. And I kind of wish I could say that to myself. Yeah.
I appreciate that too. I would often think to myself, I wish I could tell my younger self, chill out. Just enjoy the moment that you're in right now, rather than worrying about the next moment. Yep. So I could agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. I can't say it enough. I love chatting with you and hearing your story and your career trajectory throughout the world, and I can't wait to hear what's next for you. Hopefully, I hope you have a long career at Parx, but who knows what's down the pipe for you too. So I'm excited to see.
But I'm not looking up. All good. Well, thank you guys very, very, very much. I really appreciate the time. My first time ever doing this. Very, very cool. Really appreciate it.
Yes. And of course, for everyone listening, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform as well as YouTube. And thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.